How's it going, guys? What I thought I would do in this video is to show you all a little bit about how you can use a custom block in creating a PID loop and how that you might use it in various systems. So this is just going to be kind of a generic thing to where you can basically, I just want to give you an idea of how this type of thing works. Of course, the version of the tool of CCT that I am currently using is 13.2. So what we will do is I'm just going to write this in version 10.2, just again, just a very generic way of using this tool currently. And what I'm going to do is simply select a custom application from my drop down window. You can see here we do have heating, cooling, all these other things, but I want a complete custom application just for demonstration purposes, and we're just going to call it test just for that. You could also select if you want imperial or metric units of measurement. Once we have that, I'm just going to hit OK, and it's going to ask me some basic questions as far as any of this, as far as what I may want to add into this system. You can scroll down through here, and again, I am just going to be skipping all of this. So I just hit next, hit finish, and it's going to basically give me a blank screen that you see here. What I'm going to be demonstrating is to show you all how you can set up a PID loop, just basically a PID loop. So what we're going to be doing is a complete custom hybrid activity, and over here on our control block, our output control, I'm going to select new, and I am going to select hybrid activity. You can filter this by going to this line here, and you can see just a couple of letters. This is what I want. And the reason that I want to use a hybrid activity, since this is a PID loop, a PID loop, I want to be able to disable this when it is not going to be used. Okay, over here on our network inputs, I am going to also create an enumerated input to where we can turn the system on. In fact, I'm actually going to go ahead and create a Boolean input also, because there's something that I want to show you about the way that these will function. Okay, so I hit that, I hit finish, and it's going to populate these two. And we are actually going to be using them as our enable. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to right click our block, our hybrid activity block, select view logic. Alright, this is the screen that it gives us. I'm going to maximize this just a little bit, and you can see here, this is basically what we get. This is just as blank as it gets. This, of course, is going to be the state, and this is where we will actually select between turning it on and turning it off. Now, the first thing that you need to remember is that whichever one of these sections is highlighted when you're working in this is the particular state of this block that you're working on. Okay, for example, if I have the on highlighted here, but I'm trying to write something to control the state, it's not going to work properly. I need to highlight this portion here, and of course this is what we're going to be using to turn the state on and off. So the first thing that I need to do here is go to activity inputs. I am going to grab a Boolean input, and I'm also going to grab one of the enumerated inputs, and that way I can show you guys something very important that you need to see. Okay, I'm going to bring this back up. I'm going to click connections, and you can see here these 2 points. Alright, now first thing that I'm going to do on the Boolean input, I'm going to right click and select make connection. and you can see here that I have underneath the Boolean input, you can see that I have a network input for the Boolean, and I also have a logic box of state selection. Let's just cancel back out of that for a minute. I'm going to now right click the enumerated and select make connection, and you can see the same here. I have an enumerated input on the network and also logic as far as state selection and that sort of thing. You've got to match the type of input to the type of point that you are trying to pull in. Okay, in other words, you can't necessarily match in an input if you're trying to reach out and make a connection to another point. You're not going to be able to cross these two. Okay, so you need to decide which of these that you're going to need. If I double click in here to the Boolean input, the enumerated input, you can see here that I am given a lot of options. I have my state text, as far as that goes, backnet expose, fail safe. There's a lot of things here that I can change to customize this block. Alright, now let's go to our other one, and the Boolean block. I'm going to double click into it. You can see here, backnet exposed, that sort of thing, my state text. This particular type here is basically just a true, false, on, off, that sort of thing. You can, that's all that we have here is true, false. That's it. I can't change my state text or anything like that. So I'm going to cancel back out of that, and just a little bit further of an explanation on this. I can go in and change the actual state text, as you can see here. On, off, enable, disable, that sort of thing. Alright, so that is something that you want to be aware of. So just to get started, I'm actually going to grab this one, and I'm going to click, and I'm going to grab and drag that to the state, to where that's going to turn off our block, our logic block. Now, just to show you as well, I'm going to delete this out, just like that, and I can use the Boolean, but you see what it does here. It gives me a Boolean to enumerated translation, and again, that's something that you need to be aware of. You cannot use the Boolean to go straight into that. It has to use some type of a translation, and that's where the enumerated input comes into play. And just to make things a little simpler, I'm just going to go ahead and delete these out and get them out of our way. Okay, I may do another video with a little more detail on that in the future. If you're interested in anything like that, just let me know. So now what I want to do is to go back to my control, and I actually want to add a couple of more things. I'm going to add another input, and this is going to be a floating input, and this is going to be our set point. So I'm just going to click that, and I'm just going to type set point, just SP for short, just to go ahead and have a little bit of a name. You can name points like that right in this section here. You can see it populated it right there. Now I'm also going to add a hardware input. I'm going to select new, and the type of input here is going to be say just temperature. So I can simply sort my inputs here. I can hit the type of input, and you can see it has selected just all analog inputs. This is going to be like effective commands and that sort of thing. So what I'm going to do is actually scroll down, and you can see all of these different ones here, and you can see temperature. I'm just going to grab one at random. Alright, just an RTD. Basically, we can see here boiler calculated pre-temp, just whatever we want to do. Hit finish, and it will then populate that into our input block, just like that right there. Okay, so now that I have an input here as well as a set point, I'm going to go into back into our logic by selecting the view logic, and I'm going to pull those 2 points in. Okay, let's bring this back up here to where you can follow along a little bit closer with what I'm doing. I need 2 floating inputs, so I'll grab the first one here, and this is going to be our set point, so I'm going to double click and edit this and just type in SP just so it matches. That's something that I recommend you do, is to regularly and accurately label all of your points when you do something like this. So now then I'm going to, let's just back this up a little bit and we can see a little more. Grab another input, and this one is going to be called our temperature or whatever, just something random, or just whatever I need this to be used for, okay? And this is going to be the actual hardware input. So those are 2 blocks that we will need for the PID loop. Now you can see here that we have these populate here where I can make a connection. So I'm going to right click, make connection here on my set point, and you can see my network input. That's where I want to grab that to where it connects this block to that input. And then as well as my temperature, the temp one, just right click again, and you can see here I'm going to grab that as well. Alright, so in there again, this is just a generic name, even though then I selected that input that you've seen me grab here earlier. You can just have these set to where they are basically whatever you want. That was just one value that I grabbed there, but just suppose that it is a zone temp. I can actually just type in Z in, and it will actually populate the screen here with a lot of different things, like whether it's zone ZO2, zone humidity, and it gives me all of my different inputs as far as what I may need. Just right from here, but they all are going to basically function the same. You can see here zone temp, that sort of thing, and I could actually have this whatever I want it to. This is just some of the things that actually it tries to customize for you. If you're using this for zone temperature, zone pump, so if you're using pressure, it just really depends on how you are going to be using this particular input. Alright, if I wanted to use hot water, I can just type in HW for water. You can see here it populates chilled water, and there again it will just looking a little bit off of that. It's going to go like to CHW. Let's see here, if I just type in hot, you can see hot, hot, cool, hot deck, just whatever. It's flow, humidity, temperature, that sort of thing. If I wanted to type in hot, cool, damper, I type in hot water, sometimes it won't allow me. HT, right here, heating, box heating, whatever. It's all in here, basically just to get to try to help you what you need. Alright, for example, if I wanted to type in just water, if I was going to look on this, I can see flow. Again, I'm going to change my type of signal to an analog. You can see here condenser water pump 1, 2. Again, this is all just to help you customize what you're needing. Alright, so that is basically what all of this is, but you can see that all of the signals are going to be basically the same, depending on the type of system, depending on the type of process that you're doing. You can sort through and like that, just like what I've shown you here. But you can just use it as random. Alright, in fact, I can go in here and double click this boiler pump T-mode speed. Okay, if I was using the speed control, I can simply change this to whatever I want. Alright, if I wanted to control temperature, I'm just going to type in zone temp, just like this, and it's going to give you some things here that's automatically calculated, min value, max value, but so you need to kind of match it up with what you're going to be using it for. So we will just use this basically as it is, boiler pump 7 motor speed. So I'm going to go back in here, view my logic, and I've got my input for being able to enable it here. In fact, to make it a little easier as we go through, I'm just going to change the name of this to enable, just so we know what we're looking at when we're looking through these points. Okay, I have my set point. I'm going to change this from temp. We'll just leave that. If I wanted to measure temperature or something like that, if I wanted to ramp that boiler up, or just whatever I needed to do. There again, this is just kind of a generic thing to give you a little bit more of an understanding of what it is, what it does. All right, my first state is off. So I'm going to click that, and you'll see that that line disappeared. I'm not using this point now to communicate with this block, but when I go back to state, you can see it reappear, and this goes back to the point I was making earlier, that when you are working in this mode in the hybrid activity, whichever one of these is highlighted is the state that this block is going to be in where you are making your connections. Okay, now I'm going to go back to off, and for this I'm going to grab an output activity, and this is going to be our overall output. So I'm just going to grab a floating output and bring it over into the view. Okay, you can see it right there. Now I have not added anything in here, but since this state is off, whenever I turn this off, I want this output to go to 0. So I can come down here to my constant, I can drop that down, and I have my options here for Boolean, enumerated, and floating. Again, I'm going to grab a floating, and I'm going to pull it out here just like this, and I'm going to double click in here to show you something. Suppose I wanted this to go to a 50% or something like that for the constant value, or just whatever. I hit my edit button, and then I enter that value right here. But for this, since I want that value to be at 0, I'm going to leave that at 0. And now I make my connection, just like so. Okay, so whenever this state is off, whenever I flip that to disable from my network input, this state is off, the command to this output will be 0. Now if I select on, you'll notice that that disappeared. All of the logic that I'm working in within one state will disappear when I choose another state to work in. My inputs and my outputs stay, but all of the internal logic will disappear. Okay, that's when I am off, and now when I'm on, this is where I'm going to add my PID loop. Alright, so I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to drill through all of my blocks here, and for a PID loop it's going to be under the control section. So I'm going to drop that down, and there's 2 points in here that I need. I'm going to need the PID preprocessor, and then also the PID loop itself. So I drag both of those out and put these side by side, and you're about to see why. Alright, and if I blow this up just a little bit just to make it easier, basically what you're going to do here is line up the lines. Don't select any of the inputs or outputs or exposing points or anything like that at this point. You simply line up the lines. Okay, effective period, I'm going to integral. Effective integral time, I'm going to integral time. Effective proportional, and just in a moment I'll show you why we're doing that. Effective process ID, that's one that you'll see us return to. Effective time constant, okay, and again just coming across just like that. And you can see here, once I get all these connected, there are 2 that are exposed that there is nothing to connect to. And you see set point and then process variable. This is going to be our set point here, so I'm going to grab it, make my connection here, and then I'm going to grab the process variable, the temperature, and I'm going to drag that over here and connect that to the process variable. Now, when I double click into my PID preprocessor, this is where I can select the type of control I'm using, and it's going to make some configurations for us. So if I hit edit, I come over here to process ID, I can drop this down, and you can see here that I have all these options as far as what I want this particular system to control. If I come down here, you can see zone humidity, zone temp, hot water heat exchanger. I'm going to select that, and it's going to go ahead and pre-configure a lot of the values that go into that PID for us. Alright, just like that. And now I close that out. And you can also, when you are in here, I can right click on this PID loop up top here, right click it and expose points for connection. And you can see here there are a lot of other points in here that I can bring out to where I can make a connection point to those. One that I would recommend you pull out is the reset tuning, and this is something you want to do after you've made the initial connections, and you're about to see why. When I click this, you're going to see these get scrambled just a little bit. I hit that, I hit OK, and you can see how it just kind of crossed them up a little bit just because of the way that it does. But like if you have a tuning reset point, which is something I recommend you do on these PID loops especially, you would make that connection here to this. Alright, now our output from that PID loop, of course, is going to go to the output here that we have. Just a single output, and that's how it is going to fluctuate, modulate that output based upon our inputs. But suppose that we have more than one output. Okay, suppose that we have for example, just say if we have two outputs and we need to split that signal between two different outputs, say like on a steam system to where you have a 1/3, 2/3 valve or that sort of thing. What could I use to control that? How could I control that? By splitting the output of that PID loop. I simply grab my output floating, I pull another output over here, and this is going to give me the two outputs that I need. But right now, if I was to make my connection, they're going to control identically. When that PID loop is at 50%, both of these are going to be at 50%, and that's not what I want. I want to be able to split that. Okay, so I'm going to break this connection here, and once I do that, I'm going to go back over to my system here, and what I want to look for is the span block. So to split the output from that PID loop, what I'm going to do is to come over to the calculation folder. I'm dropping that down, and I'm actually going to grab a couple of span blocks. Alright, I pull over the first one, and then I'm going to pull over a second one, just like that. And I'm actually going to make my connections between the span block and those outputs, just like that. Now I'm going to make a connection here from my present value from my PID loop to each of these span blocks also. Alright, now what I need to do is to go into the span blocks. If I'm going to be using this, I have my input range low and high, and what I want to do is change that. Alright, I'm going to drop this down to 50. Okay, once I drop that to 50, I'm going to hit apply. And what will happen here is an input to the span block of 0 to 50 will produce an output of 0 to 100, which is what I would want to do. You know, if this was a heat exchanger, again, a 1/3 valve, and when that PID loop told me that I needed to be at half of my total capacity, then the 1/3 valve should be at 100%, you know, if those valves were equal. Now on my second span block, I'm going to go into it, and I am going to edit that, and I want this one on my input range low. I don't want it to open until that PID loop hits at least 50%. So I'm going to change that, and what that will do is it will run that output to, or it will not open that second output until it has reached at least 50% on the output from that PID loop. To show you a little more detail about how this works, this is actually a live program that I did a while back, and we are going to go into the program and we're going to view the logic as it is running. Now, the way that I have this particular program being enabled is I want to make sure that my hot water system enabled, because what I'm controlling is 3 heat exchanger valves. So I want to make sure that I have my hot water system enabled. I also want to make sure that I have status from one of my pumps, okay? And you can see here I do have status from my pump. I had to go through that enumerated to Boolean translation right here, and the reason that I had to do that was the way that my status is pulled in on this particular program, using that hardware input. This is why it had to be flipped to that enumerated Boolean translation. All right, and that is what controls the state. And you can see here right now we are commissioned in, so the green color is the indication of the current state of this logic block since we are enabled. If I were to click my off, you can see there it went from the blue being here to here. This is what I'm currently working in, and you can see here my constant value here is writing a 0 into each of these valve outputs. Okay, when this block is off, I want those valves to close. That's what this section here is doing. When I go to my on section, which is currently running, you can see here my PID loop. You can see my hot water set point, my hot water temp, all the inputs over here to that PID loop. You can also see my tuning reset that I'd mentioned earlier. Okay, and you can see the output from it is going to each of these span blocks, and you will notice that the output of those span blocks do not match. And the reason for that is, like I mentioned earlier, that you will want to change that input range to have it affect the output of this span block in accordance with what this PID loop is doing. Currently the PID loop is putting out 27.6% to all of these span blocks, and it is just needing one valve. That 27.6 is not enough to even open that second valve. If I go in here, since this is 3 valves, you can see here my input range low is 0 to 33. If I were to go to my second one, the input range on it is going to be 33 to 66, and of course my final one is going to be 66 to 100. That's just, I know that there's probably some decimal places and everything in that to split 3 ways, but that seems to work pretty well, as you can see there. But guys, this is just a brief overview of how you can use a PID loop, just a basic setup of a PID loop. The basic structure, again, it is just very generic. It is just to try to help give you a little bit better understanding. Guys, if you like the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. You can help support the channel by purchasing anything that you need through the Amazon affiliate links down below. You can also support us on Patreon, and you can find a link for that down below. Just if you have any questions, leave those down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.